Welcome to Doing Big Things. I'm Brett McDermott, and every week we are going to explore the systems, mindset, and habits that are allowing people to take action on their dreams and be the hero of their own story. My hope is that you walk away from every episode with new tools and strategies that will help you to realize your full human potential and do big things in your own life. I appreciate you being here. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Doing Big Things, the DBT. And today we are joined by a really cool guest. He is the founder of MasterTalk. He's got over 40,000 followers on Instagram, over 30,000 on YouTube, and they all look to him to help them communicate in a more powerful way. He helps ambitious entrepreneurs and executives become top 1% communicators within their industry. And today he's going to teach us all how to communicate in a more effective way as well. Brenden Kumarasamy, thank you for being on the show, my man.
Brett, the pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm excited. And anyone who follows Brenden on any of these socials knows that he is an absolute expert in all things communication, whether it be interpersonal or public speaking. So we're going to dive in to all of that today. And I think a good place to start is maybe not even the spoken word, but let's talk a little nonverbal communication. And when you're working with companies and you're working with clients, what are one or two or three things in a nonverbal sense that you usually coach them up on? Maybe they need a little changing on a regular basis. What are two or three nonverbal things that we can put into our game plan to be more powerful communicators?
Absolutely, Brett. Let's start with the good news. The good news is most of us as human beings don't actually make that many mistakes in our nonverbals throughout our whole body. So a lot of us don't put our hands in our pockets. We don't put our hands behind our backs when we're speaking. So these are simple things we can avoid. But there is one key area I found 90% of the people I've worked with over the years, they really needed to be trained on it.
That's a lot.
And it's but it's one thing, which is the good news. Which is the face. So obviously it's a little difficult on podcasts for those of you listening to the audio, so just pay close attention. I'll try my best to verbalize it. So there's three key pieces in our face that a lot of us get wrong. The first one, Brett, is smiling. So a lot of us, when we're talking, especially when we're listening, so you're in real estate, so when you're listening to your customers, to clients, a lot of us make the mistake of listening without smiling. Okay. So you're talking and I'll go, but I'm not smiling as I'm listening. And what this tells the other person, even if you're paying attention, is to them subconsciously is like, oh, I guess this person doesn't really care about what I say. They're not really excited about what I have to say. So you have to trick your mind into smiling while listening, where you're kind of nodding your head and you're smiling. That's the first piece. The second nonverbal is the eyes. So a lot of people, Brett, they have their eyes really closed when they speak, especially people whose first language is in English. So a lot of my Indian clients, Chinese clients, Korean clients, just in general, this is something I used to struggle with too. Our eyes are just really closed when we speak, but it's across all ethnicities. So you really want to open your eyes a little bit more so your face looks more expressive. And then the final piece is your eyebrows, where a lot of people, they just keep their eyebrows in the same place the entire time, which is okay. But if you do it for like 10 minutes straight, it looks like half of your face is frozen. So those are the main things I focus on.
That's pretty interesting, right? So try and move your eyebrows a little bit. You're going to show a little bit more, expression that way. Otherwise, it looks like you just got a bad plastic surgery job done, right? And we're trying to avoid that. And that is pretty interesting because I do feel that a lot of people, when listening, do not smile, right? Yeah, they kind of stay very stern, and that probably is the way that they think that they should be doing it. But I agree. If you give someone a smile here and there while listening to them, it is an indicator that you're enjoying, what they are saying. So that is really interesting stuff. Just curious, when listening, and of course we're smiling, and then when we're speaking, we're trying to open our eyes a little bit more too, which I think that's a great tip. Do you ever kind of coach people on maybe like relaxing the muscles in their face or anything along that line? I'm just curious because I know for myself, sometimes I feel like when I'm listening or even when I'm speaking, I can feel a little bit of tension in my face build, and I feel like people pick up on that. And I feel like when I actually make like an internal suggestion to myself to remove the tension from my face, I feel like I get better results in a communication way. Have you ever heard or thought or coached anything on the tension that gets stored in the face?
That's a really very interesting and specific question I've never been asked before, Brett. Here, there's two ways of answering this question. So one's the indirect way and one's the direct way. So let me start
Great.
with the indirect way, which is the way that I think about communication, to your point, because I try and be really good on all areas, not just one areas of comms that you pointed out really well in the intro, is for me, communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So one of those balls is smiling, one is eye contact, and one is vocal tone variety, one of them is pacing, one of them is storytelling. But if you try and juggle all 18 balls at the same time, they all fall flat. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what are the first couple of balls that we should spend most of our focus on? A good analogy, let's say in real estate, let's say you're a real estate agent, it would be, yeah, you could focus on a bunch of different things, but the most important one is probably knowing how to lead open houses so you can get them to eventually buy the house. It's probably a very important activity. So it's the same thing here. So now the direct way of answering your question, I actually haven't put much thought into the question that you asked, but what I would say in general is if you don't have tension, like if you look really serious when you're talking, the stress actually shows on your face. So I would just listen to a little piano if that's a problem.
I love it.
You'll calm down really fast.
I love it. And I really like the analogy there of, juggling all these balls, right? But if you're up there and you're thinking, boy, I better tell a good story, and boy, my toasting, my pacing better be good. I better add some pauses and some vocal variety, and I better have good eye contact, and I better smile. I mean, you're going to pass out.
Literally.
You might pass out mid conversation. So when you're kind of coaching people on how to improve their communication skills, like what is like a good way to practice communication? Like, should I just wake up one week and be like, okay, this week I'm just focused on good eye contact, and next week I'll focus on vocal variety, and the next week I'll focus on good storytelling? Like, how do you chunk it out? Like, what's a good strategy of actually practicing all these different skills?
Absolutely. And your thought process is superb there, Brett, because you're 100% correct there, where it's you want to focus on something different every week. But now the question becomes, what should those three balls be? I call them my easy threes. So let's jump into those. So the first one is the random word exercise. Pick any word you want. It could be soap, it could be nose, wall, doorknob, it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
And create 60-second presentations out of thin air with no preparation.
Oh, I like that.
This serves two main purposes, Brett. The first one is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. So if you would talk about like hemp seeds and table, it's very easy for you to go back to your industry expertise, whether it's real estate or technology, and you can speak really well on those topics. The second utility of the random word exercise is small talk. What is small talk at the end of the day? Two strangers meet each other and they ask each other questions that the other person hasn't prepared for. So if you know how to do the random word exercise a lot and you practice this, you'll get much better over time. And that's ball number one.
Love that. So is that something that you think anyone trying to improve their communication skills should just do a random word a day and just speak for it on 60 seconds? And that's probably like the easiest go-to thing that we can squeeze in every day to become more effective communicators.
Absolutely. I know it sounds so simple, but it's so simple, Brett, nobody does it. And that's really the key, is like I've coached engineers, CEOs, women executives, like across the board. And everybody, whether they're making $10 million a year or $50,000 a year, the answer is the same. Did you do the random word exercise 100 times? So now the next point is, how do you get to 100? Well, there's a couple of different ways. For those of you listening who have children, doing this with kids is the most efficient way of practicing this exercise. So if you got like young kids, 8, 7, if you don't, young nieces, nephews, they don't overthink the exercise. They don't go, Brett, let's talk about the fear of judgment for 30 minutes. They go, bacon? Oh, my mom made that this morning. They just do the presentation. That's one way of doing it. Obviously, coaches, you pay for the accountability, but doing it with your family is the best way to do it quickly.
That's really good stuff. And I think that's something that listeners can kind of implement tonight, tomorrow, maybe on their commute to work, just pick out something random and start talking about it 60 seconds. But it makes sense. It'll help you get a little quicker on your feet. It'll make you better in those water cooler conversations. And, just to kind of get back to nonverbal, because I think there's just so much there. And I'm sure that this is a point that you touch on when you're coaching people on how to give public presentations as well as interpersonal conversations. But what about like the importance of posture and, how it kind of displays us to the world? And, how do you coach clients on having proper posture, that we display confidence, but maybe not, too much bravado?
100%, Brett. So 2 parts to that answer. Let's talk about virtual versus in person.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, virtual, there's not much coaching on posture.
Right.
What you really have to focus on, which is the good news, is just the percentage of your body relative to the screen. So you'll notice here, me and you have around 75% of our body and face covered in this screen today, which is the right amount, in my opinion. It's okay. You could be 60%, 70. There's no hard rule of thumb, but you don't want to be too close because it's weird, right? If I'm taking up 90%,
sure.
Or if I'm really behind, I look really, really tiny. So that would be the advice on posture. In terms of in person, the typical advice still applies, which is, shoulders straight, make sure your neck is straight. My neck's actually crooked because of a disability I have, so I don't even do posture perfectly, which is totally fine. So don't get discouraged. And then the last bonus tip, which actually doesn't come from me, it comes from Brian Johnson, is look up his hamstring stretch on Google. You just type hamstring stretch Brian Johnson and do that a few minutes a day. And I can literally touch my whole hand on the floor, just stretching with my hand, just because my back is so flexible now because of that hamstring stretch. So I highly recommend it.
So, hi everybody. We had some technical difficulties, but we are back. So we are talking with Brenden about all things positive and powerful communication. So how about the smile? Now, is there like a good way, a more effective way to implement the smile in our conversations? I know you told me earlier it's a good thing to smile while we're listening. Should we smile a lot? Should we try and not smile too much? Is there a percentage? Should we smile slowly? Should we smile quickly? I don't know. Is there anything that you coach your clients on as far as specific to the smile?
I love the details of your question. I love the curiosity behind it. Here's the general idea. Okay. So there's different types of smiles. So what you want to avoid is whenever you're speaking, where you kind of have like I call this the poker face, where you just... You just look like this and you don't smile at all. That's not good, especially for long periods of time. So little smile is always better than no smile, except in some circumstances where you smile a little bit like this.
Okay.
Notice how there's a massive difference in how the person perceives you. But then there's a third type of smile, which is smiling with your teeth. So my teeth are horrible. I need to go see a dentist. So
I would disagree with that. I think you've got a nice smile, Brenden.
Thanks, man. So you can smile with your teeth, but I generally think that smiling a little bit goes a long way. That's probably the extent of my knowledge on smiling, but I'll let you know if I find anything more in detail.
I think that's good advice. I think that really is good advice there. And I do really like the one about smiling while listening, because I think it's something that a lot of people just don't do. And they probably don't realize that it's affecting the way that they're being received. So, let's talk about eye contact quickly. And, is there a percentage of the time while we're speaking or listening that we should be making eye contact? Does it differ if we're speaking with a male or female? Like, how do you coach your clients up on how to effectively use eye contact?
Yeah, for sure, Brett. So let's separate that once again. So online, the advice is really simple, which is almost 100% of the time, you always want to keep your eyes in one location, which is to your camera lens. And what's nice about online is whether you're speaking to 1 or 10,000 people on a Zoom call or just in general, when you look in the same direction, it gives the illusion that you're looking at everybody all at the same time. So that's the simple idea. In person, it's a little trickier. I call this prioritize to maximize. So there's a couple of ground rules with eye contact. The first one is start to think about, in some situations, let's say you're pitching a big investment or something, you want to prioritize your eye contact to the key decision makers in the meeting that you're in. So let's say you're doing a big B2B presentation that's very technical, 10 people are in the room, but the CTO is pretty much the person making the decision. You're still splitting your eye contact across the room, but you're giving some extra special attention to the key decision makers that are going to be closing the deal for you. That's one way of approaching it. The second way is to divide up your time across different subsets of rooms. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have an 8-minute presentation. Sorry, not an 8 minutes, too complicated. Like a 10-minute presentation. So how would it work? What I like to do is you do 3 or 4 minutes in the middle, then 2 minutes on the left, 2 minutes on the right, last 2 minutes back in the center. So you want to try and make sure that your body has at least shifted to each of the angles of the room at least once throughout your communication. And the third rule only applies in small rooms, let's say 10, 15, 20 people,
Sure.
and the length of your keynote. Let's say you got 30 people in a room and you have an hour to speak. You have time to look into everyone individually in the eyes at least once in that hour. So you want to try and do that. And I know it's uncomfortable, but doing that really helps you be very good at eye contact and making people feel special when you speak.
Wow, that is really good advice. I love that for smaller groups. I mean, you should have enough time there to really have that goal of making eye contact with everybody there. That's really good stuff. And then slightly larger groups, just make sure that you're kind of almost rotating and making sure every section of the room gets some of your eye contact. And then if you're in a room and you know who that decision maker is, it makes sense to kind of give them a little more eye contact than the rest of the group. That is really good stuff there. So I guess we'll kind of transfer over from nonverbal, to some more verbal communication. And I think what a lot of people want with their communication skills is, they want to be seen as charismatic, right? They don't want to be seen as monotone, a robot. They want to have some vocal variety. They want to have some great pacing. They want to have some great melody to their speech. How do you coach people up on how to leverage vocal variety to sound more charismatic?
Absolutely, Brett. So here's the game behind vocal tones. There are 3 different types of tones whenever we communicate an idea. Generally speaking, to keep it really simple for people. The first one is your normal speaking tone. This is how we normally speak, etc. Second tone is high tone. So high tone is 20% higher than how we normally speak. Not this. This is yelling, right? This is too loud.
Right.
This, right? 20% higher. And then the opposite, the third tone, is low tone, 20% lower. Not this. This is whispering, right? This. That's lesson 1. Lesson 2, Brett, and this is surprising because once we see it, we can't unsee it anymore, is that the best speakers in the world use all 3 tones at the same time when they're speaking. Example. Let's take the sentence, John loves apples. He has one every day to keep the doctor away. So I just did that in my regular speaking tone.
Yes.
Let's try something more varied. John has apples every day. He has one to keep the doctor away. So notice I start high, then go low, then go high again. Mm-hmm. So I'm shifting my vocal tones like a roller coaster instead of a boat ride. So it sounds a lot more exciting. So that's how you vary your tones in a speech.
I like that. And just by varying it and bringing it up and bringing it back down, I feel like it's just going to really keep people's attention much more effectively than just that smooth, steady boat ride, which is probably going to put people to sleep.
You got it.
So that is really good vocal variety coaching right there. Now, what do you ever kind of coach people up, your clients, on, effectively inserting pauses into their speech? And do you feel that is something important that we should all be working on?
100%. Pausing is like building a muscle at the gym, Brett. So when you start, I don't want people to be super strategic about this because most beginners, it's either a binary thing. They either pause or they don't. And most of them don't at all. So they just talk as they're speaking. And notice how I just did that for 2 seconds and you're already feeling overwhelmed. Imagine some people do that for 20 minutes, Brett. So it doesn't really work that well. Kind of like that friend in our life who goes, I have this amazing story, and they start yapping. Then 50 minutes later, you're like, oh my God, I need to get out of this room. This is torture. I need to die. So the trick is, even if you're pausing in the wrong places, you got to practice pausing. And the best way to do this in person is a strategy I teach called the forced silence drill. So here's how this works. So somebody talks. You can only do this with a partner, unfortunately, but it doesn't need to be a coach unless you can afford one. It could be like a friend. If you live with a significant other, it could be that person. If you live with a parent, it could be that person, where all they have to do is when you give a speech, they point at you. And every time they point at you, you have to stop talking until they take the finger away. So it forces you to pause. So what I do with clients that I teach in person, my advanced ones I teach in person, is whenever I'm meeting them, I go like boom, 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 and they just go because they don't want to get stopped. They don't want to make a mistake. And after 5 minutes, they get really good at implementing those pauses in their speaking. Another way to do this is you take a speech that you wrote. Don't make it a big speech. Make it like a 2-3 minute video you're working on, a 2-3 minute pitch, and just type the word pause. Add some color to the script so that way when you read it, you're forced to pause as well. There's some couple easy ways to practice that.
Very cool. I love that pointer drill. I think that would be super effective just to do with your significant other while you're sitting around at the dinner table. And I do think pauses are something that most people don't use. You're right. They just kind of go on and on and on. But just inserting that pause every once in a while, it gives your listener a little bit of time to catch up. It gives your point a little bit of time to land. And it just shows a little bit of power because you know, or at least you believe in yourself, that even if you pause, no one's going to jump in there and interrupt you. They're going to wait for you to finish your statement. So I think that the power of the pause cannot be understated. And I love those drills for really ingraining the practice. How about storytelling, right? We all have those friends that were seemingly born natural storytellers. They can sit at a dinner table and they can really just light it up. And it's a great quality to have in personal life and business. What about people that are maybe not great storytellers, but they want to have this talent? Like, how do we build the talent of storytelling?
Absolutely. So there's two parts to doing that, Brett. The first one is, did we master what we talked about earlier in the conversation? Mm-hmm. So for example, if somebody's listening to this and they're saying, man, I want to be the best storyteller on the planet, but they're not practicing their vocal variety. They're not doing the random word extras. They're not slowing down their pace. Doesn't matter how good the story is, it's going to fall flat. Once upon a time, Brett, there was this princess. Like, it just doesn't work, right? So even if you have the best story, if you present it really badly, it just doesn't work. So that's one piece. Focus on the foundations. The second part is a quote from Les Brown, which is, never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point. What does Les mean by this quote? What he means is, every great story starts with a key lesson first. Every great story has a key lesson. We all have that friend who goes, I have a great story for you, and they're talking, and after 20 minutes, you're like, when is this story going to end? Like, what's the point of this thing? And they don't stop. And the reason is because there's no key lesson. So then how do you build effective storytelling? Start with the lesson first, not the story. Make a list of lessons that you would be excited to teach in your life. Could be don't give up, keep persevering, something about your specific industry. And then find a story related to that lesson. I'll give you a personal example with me. So what's my key lesson? And every time I keynote, every time I'm on a podcast, what I try to convey, Brett, is that anybody can be an exceptional communicator. You don't need to be born with it. So now the question is, what do I storyboard? What do I tell to convince people of that? And I've tried a multitude of different things. I've tried some CEO who's really bad at the beginning, use a client example. I've tried that. But you know what the best one is? My personal story. I got a crooked left arm. I spoke my whole life in a second language. I grew up in Montreal in Canada. That's where I'm still based. And then on top of that, I studied in accounting, Brett. I coach some of the most prominent CEOs in the world, and I'm an accounting major. So the point to this is, if I can do it, you can too. So there you go.
I love it. And I think that is a good pointer, right? Every great story starts with a great lesson. I think that's something just to keep in mind the next time that you're about to tell a tale at the dinner table or at a meeting or whatever it is. Make sure there's a lesson behind that story, whatever that is. Now, I want to kind of jump over to a communication skill that I think a lot of people are probably lacking in, and maybe one that they don't necessarily put a lot of importance in, but it might be the most important, or certainly one of the more important. And I think that's listening, and just, the art form of being a great listener, making the person in front of you feel heard. I think it's really important. Is there anything that you coach your clients up on how to be extraordinary listeners?
For sure, Brett. So the old saying goes I think it's by Socrates or Aristotle, I forgot which one, where he said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. So we know how important it is. But where the gap I see in the industry is that no one really teaches this in a way that's practical. Like, how do you measure success in listening? Like, am I improving as a listener, or am I degrading as a listener? So I'll make this really simple. I invented a trick that people can use, a tip, and implement. It's called the goals call. The goals call. So here's what you do. pick a friend in your life, somebody you already enjoy talking with. You don't have to do this with a stranger. Just do this with like a friend, a significant other, a growth buddy, just somebody that you just love talking with in general. You book 45 minutes with them. 45 minutes. The first 5 minutes of the call goes something like this. Hey, Brett, I just want to support you today. Tell me what your top 3 goals are for the year and why are those goals important to you. And they could be in any area of your life. So what that person does is that they start taking 5 minutes and write out their 3 goals. It might be a weight loss goal, a money goal, a relationship goal, etc., and why that goal is important to them. Then minutes 5 to 10, that person recaps back to the listener, hey, these are my goals. This is why it's important. Then what happens is you restate what you heard. Hey, just to make sure I got that, Brett, your top 3 goals were A, B, C, and the reason these were important to you was 1, 2, 3. Did I get that correctly? Is there anything else that you want to add to that? Oftentimes that person will add a couple of more details they didn't say before. And then for the remainder of the call, Brett, this is the key piece. You are not allowed to give advice. You're not allowed to give advice.
Tough. That's tough for a lot of people.
It is. The only thing you're allowed to do is ask more clarifying questions and restate what they heard. Example, if they said they want to make more money this year, you can ask them questions like, well, how much money are you making now? How much money do you want to make next year? And you just do that for the rest of the call. You do that with 10 people, you'll be an exceptional listener.
I love that, the restating of what they said. I think it's something that most of us do not do, but it's something that it's almost like you're giving them proof that you're listening. It's like, yeah, I was listening. Here's proof of that. I'm going to reflect it back to you and make sure that I got it correctly and I heard your message properly. Really, really cool stuff. I forget what book it was, but I remember they had like an analogy of, every conversation is a swiveling spotlight. And if you can do your best to shine that spotlight on the other person, like 75% of the time, then they're going to walk away from that conversation feeling like you're the most interesting person in the room, when really you may have not even said much about yourself at all, but you put the spotlight on them, you let them talk about their lives, you were really interested in what they were saying, and people really appreciate it when you shine that spotlight on them and you actually listen to what they're saying. So I want to kind of jump over and end on presentations, right? And the importance of being a solid public speaker, being able to stand up in front of people and deliver a message. When you're coaching someone who's got a big presentation up, how do you coach them to prepare for that presentation? Is there a certain number of times you like them to go through the material? Like, how does one prepare for, like, let's say a big presentation that they know they have at the end of the week?
For sure, Brett. I call this strategy puzzle. So we all know what a jigsaw puzzle is. Those 1,000-piece puzzles you used to do as kids, you put the pieces together. So now the question becomes, when we work on a jigsaw puzzle, which pieces do we start with first? And the answer for most of us is the edges. Because they got those little corners to them, they're easier to find in the box, easier to put together, and then you work your way into the middle. Why do I bring up that analogy, Brett? Very simple. Because unfortunately, in presentations, we don't do that. We do the opposite. We shove a bunch of content into the speech. We get to the presentation, we ramble throughout the whole thing, and the last slide sounds something like this. Yeah, so thanks. Not the way first.
That's not how you want to end with a bang, right?
Yeah. This is more like you're ending with the fizzle out or something. But so the key is tactically prepare like a jigsaw puzzle. What does that mean? Practice the edges first. Just do the intro. So whenever I'm coaching a client on a big speech, Brett, just give me the intro 10, 15 times. But you have to make it the best intro you ever gave in your life. That's actually not that hard of an outcome because most people have really bad intros. And second, this is a 30-minute exercise, Brett. 30 minutes? What are you talking about, Brenden? Your introduction's 2 minutes. So if you practice that 10, 15 times, that's 30 minutes. Super easy. Same thing with the conclusion. What's a terrible TV show? Sorry, what's a movie with a terrible ending? A terrible movie.
Right.
That's the game, right? So it's the same thing with the conclusion. Make your last 2 minutes just as memorable as the first 2. Same game. 15 times for the ending. Even if you do this 5 times, by the way, you'll still get results. And then work your way into the middle. If you just follow that order, you're going to be a lot more motivated when you practice speeches, Brett. Because usually what happens oftentimes is you present the whole thing once, and then you go, "Oh, I'm tired and I suck. Let me get lunch," and then you don't practice again until the speech.
Brenden, that is awesome. And I've never honestly heard that tactic before. Start on the edges, really nail the beginning, nail the end, and then work on the body of the speech. But I agree. I think it is certainly a more effective way to go about it, and one that will be more easily to keep yourself motivated while working on it. Good stuff, my man. I mean, you really brought it today. I think anyone that listens is going to walk away with one or two or three things that they can implement into their communication skills right away. Where can people follow you, keep up with what you're doing, and keep up with all these cool communication hacks?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Brett. And you're such a great listener, so thanks for giving me the space to share today and for the quality of your questions. So 2 ways to keep in touch. There's many, but I'll give you 2 easy ways. The first one is you can just follow my YouTube channel, which is MasterTalk in one word. You could just Google the word MasterTalk or find it on YouTube and you'll find me pretty easily. And the second way to keep in touch is I do a free workshop on communication every 2 weeks. It's absolutely free. It's 90 minutes. It's over Zoom and it's a lot of fun. So if you want to jump on that, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
There it is, guys. Brenden, thank you for being here. Everyone out there, thank you for listening. And until next week, get out there and do big things.